No,
you're supposed. I'm doing the beats. You got to rap on top. You said you had bars.
I
said
don't
had bars. Where are your bars?
I have bars. They are being saved for Canton when we end up going to karaoke night, and I'll just rip off something fresh, like real fresh. But unfortunately, you're not going to be in Canton. So let's talk about something that you were involved with today, and let's go ahead and discuss this this bus ride that you had, because I want to know all about it.
Oh my gosh! So I mean, Chase knows, like, getting on one of the buses or the trains back from my work, which is downtown Vancouver, out to campus, which is the very western tip of Vancouver, in rush hour, like it's a hectic situation. Best thing about Vancouver transit system is that it's all a grid, so you get these long streets, 4th Avenue, 10th Avenue, etc. They go all the way down. Problem is that when you're catching the bus from campus downtown, it's lovely because you get on the first stop and you just ride it all the way down. When you're getting off from downtown, it's like if you're not at the first stop, you could run into some issues where the buses are very full. So oftentimes, literally, I'll text Chase and Shay, like, I'm 10 minutes late. I can't get on the fucking train today. I can't get on the bus today. Anyway, I get on this time, no problem. But it's about halfway standing room only. Everybody else is sitting down. And I see this one girl who's sitting, like, I don't know what buses look like in America. I assume roughly the same. There's like the 3 seats at the front. It's like there's 3. It's like 1, 2, 3, and they kind of fold up if someone has a wheelchair or a baby stroller or something. Anyway, that's what they look like. And so she's sitting in the middle seat. She has her purse on one seat beside her, and she has her AirPods case on the other beside her. She's like maybe 105 pounds, like a tiny human being.
No.
She's just making herself at home, and like everyone else is like standing squished together, just staring at this woman. Oh, it was hilarious. I was absolutely dying, like just completely oblivious to the situation around her.
Oh, that's brutal. That's brutal.
To me, that's like she for sure. If she was on Underdog, she for sure would be the person who has like AJ Brown and Jamar Chase and Deebo Samuel and whoever else, but then takes like Patrick Mahomes in round 4, right before you have, trying to get your stack. It's like, oh, I have all the other quarterbacks, but I'm going to take
that cockblock type person. That's brutal.
That's her for sure.
Jeez, I just realized I went live to my personal Facebook page instead of fantasy football discussion. So we're starting out strong. We're starting out real strong. I'm sharing it right now to the fantasy discussion group. Hopefully we'll get some people in here, of course. But yeah, you ready to start the show?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let me switch back over here and let's kick this show off. Man, I'm so mad at Shane.
This is Fantasy Intervention. Now here to intervene with your fantasy life, Shane Manila, Jacob Sanderson, and Chase Vernon.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into Fantasy Intervention. We have a show coming at y'all tonight. Of course, we normally discuss different topics for the Dynasty season, but it's time for redraft, baby. It's time for redraft. It's time to get into the nuts and the bolts and the mechanics of what makes these engines run. And of course, one of our main topics, typically when you talk about, players in fantasy football, is these offensive systems, these offenses as a whole, and what these offenses can do with assets on their fantasy teams, which players can support, or I should say, which teams can support multiple players on here. And so, of course, I bring in my co-host, Jacob Sanderson. You can find him on Twitter at FF_RTDB. What's going on, Jacob? How you doing, man?
What's up? I'm doing good, man. We're fully into preseason. There's actual games being played soon enough, so we'll have things to break down. That makes your life easier, trying to figure out a show topic for us every single week. It's fun, man. It's good times. I can feel it, the excitement. The long hours at work just seem even longer when you're thinking about all the different, ways we're going to see football on our screen soon. So it's an exciting time to be alive in the fantasy space. I know you all are going to go have fun ripping it up in Canton, Ohio, coming up soon. So
couple days, fantasy convention or the fantasy expo, excuse me. Yeah, I'm excited for it. It's going to be an interesting time. You guys can find us, of course, with the Trophy Smack crew over there. Shane should be a part of that. We got Jacob, of course. Or I'm sorry, we got Nate, of course. Yeah, he won't be there.
Well, I'll be there in spirit, Have a drink for me.
Oh, I will. I'll have multiple drinks. Hopefully I won't. And never mind, I'm not even going to go into what happened last year. Luckily, Shane isn't here to talk about it as well. But no, let's go ahead and hop into this episode because every year we talk about how, different teams and different offenses end up producing or having fantasy producers from year to year and how you want players on good offenses. And I feel like it's overblown a little bit because we talk about like the Saquon Barkleys and the Christian McCaffreys of the world and how they were able to produce on subpar teams. However, where I guess people or analysts do get it right is the fact that you can't have multiple assets on one team produce at a high end level. Jacob, do you really care about the offenses and how they produce when you're drafting? Like, do you really look that hard into it?
Depends on the format a little bit. Like in best ball, a ton, right? Because there's only so much pie to go around, especially in the context of spike weeks. Like Brandon Cooks is a great example, and he's a guy that I think gets talked about a lot in the space. Like, don't you feel like every year sort of there's these players that almost become like stand-ins for an idea, right? It's like
Yes.
Last year I felt like Jacobs, like it's like at some point he stopped being a running back and he started just being like the epitome of the dead zone running back theory. And so like he became like a political figure. And I feel like Brandon Cooks is like that for like floor at wide receiver. It's like, does floor matter? Should we draft a high floor wide receiver? And Brandon Cooks has sort of become that. And like, he's a guy where, if you're in a managed deep league, like his consistency, what he brings you every single week, it's providing you some value over replacement. He's a target of mine in Dynasty because he has cheap production. In a best ball format, he was a great year last year. Best year of his career and got his ADP to rise back up. He cracked 20 points once, right? It's just hard to do. It's hard to crack 20 half PPR points on the frickin' Texans. So if you're playing best ball and it's like, okay, how can I have this massive ceiling week in week 17? Like, it's not impossible. I mean, the Lions weren't all that incredible. We saw Amon-Ra St. Brown have a big spike that usually those are going to come from teams that score a lot of points, right? We saw all those spike weeks down the stretch from guys like Kelsey against the Chargers, T. Higgins and Mark Andrews going back and forth, Jamar Chase going back and forth with freaking Darrell Williams in the final week. So it's something that plays in my mind more in those kind of formats. But if you don't need to hit that 95th, 98th, 99th percentile outcome as much, I'm okay drafting players from, I think, worse offenses, but it comes down to the cost and it comes down to the player.
Well, I mean, it was Marquise Brown, too. Like, Marquise Brown, you would think is boom because he's a deep target type wide receiver. But the reality was he gave you very, very good weeks, the majority of the season. He didn't really, have too many weeks where he was a bust, and he didn't have too many weeks where he was a boom. So it was kind of weird. It was kind of weird because you think that these deep type receivers actually give you that. But more towards the offenses, I think that people concentrate too much on these dynamic offenses and then also take credit away from the good offenses when it comes to good players. So like when you have these great offenses and whatnot, like if you end up having a perfect example would be the Cincinnati Bengals, right? So the Cincinnati Bengals end up having multiple dynamic weapons across their offense. And yet all these assets are being considered as, wide receiver ones. When you talk about T. Higgins, you talk about Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon is an RB1, right? Like, you talk about, and it's not even an RB and wide receiver one. You're talking about like top 5, top 6 at their positions. Yeah. We're talking about Tyler Boyd still cracking, the wide receivers in some cases. And it's like, how can you actually get that much value out of a person? Meanwhile, when you talk about some of these poor offenses, right, that we're going to discuss, I mean, the good don't get enough credit. Like this time last year, I had hope for Sam Darnold, which should have never been the case. But when people did have hope for Sam Darnold, DJ Moore was cracking, round 2 in some drafts for redraft leagues. So having DJ Moore now this year with Baker Mayfield, like we're not seeing the same sort of dynamism what we saw last year. Like it's credited to the offense. Mayfield's going to be the core. We'll dive into that here shortly, of course. But I mean, do you feel like sometimes the pendulum swings too hard?
Well, it can, but the one thing that I really like about these targeting the better offenses is that often you have more contingent value in those situations, right? Like you mentioned Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd's a guy that I really like drafting this year, actually, because he's a lot cheaper than he used to be. And like I did an FFPC Football Guys Challenge team on stream with Josh Larkey, and we took Tyler Boyd, I think, as our wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6, something like that. I can't remember. But basically what we had done is we started running back in the first couple rounds. And then we wanted to capture that upside at wide receiver. So we took some shots on Sky Moore, on Traylon Burks, right? But we don't know if we want to put those guys in the lineup in week 1. We're not sure what the role is going to be in week 1. So we go in and we grab a guy like Boyd, where he can be a flex play in week one and be serviceable. But also he has that contingent upside where if T. Higgins goes down, if Jamar Chase goes down, Boyd all of a sudden is like an every week wide receiver 2 type of situation, like we saw him be even just a couple of years ago in what's now an improved offense. We saw similarly with Chris Godwin last year. Like he was good regardless. When Antonio Brown went out, Godwin really leveled up to being like a top 5 every week play. And that kind of contingent value does not exist in some of these lower offenses. I mentioned Cooks, but it applies to really any of these offenses that don't have these deep skill player groups. Think of like a Michael Pittman or a DJ Moore or a Terry McLaurin or what have you. Like there really isn't any room for them to grow from a projectable volume standpoint. Like there's no one in their way on the depth chart. So they're basically already projected for whatever they're projected for. And maybe the quarterback's better, or maybe they outproduce that. But like if Paris Campbell goes down, like Michael Pittman really doesn't actually get that much of a boost. Like he's probably already being projected for a 27% target share. Once you sort of reach that point where you're maxed out, it's diminishing returns versus you look at a situation like the Raiders where you have 3 legit weapons. Like if Darren Waller goes down, like Adams actually could get more volume or vice versa. Similar with say the Eagles or the 49ers, situations like that. So that's kind of oftentimes comes part and parcel with targeting these good offense is what I want to do is like, where can I find some value that isn't tied up in the projection? Often that's with contingent value. Often to have contingent value, you need to have a lot of good skill players. And if you have a lot of good skill players, it's probably a good offense.
So I give it to you 100% with Paris Campbell, right? Like that makes complete sense to me as to like, hey, he goes down. But couldn't that actually offer more upside in week-to-week projections because of the fact that Paris Campbell is not there to take away a 50-yard, bomb for a touchdown. And now all of a sudden, Michael Pittman could end up having 4 more receptions on that drive for, 30, 40 yards.
Because Paris Campbell typically scores a lot of 50-yard touchdowns.
Compared to what he's targeted at, you can't say he doesn't after last year.
I think he did that once in his career, and then he broke his foot, and that was actually
on that play.
All year.
Yes. So that's what I'm saying.
I see what you're saying to a point, but like having explosive playmakers is probably on net good for other players in the offense. Like you want your offense to be capable of scoring points and moving the football. Like on a given drive, it's bad, right? Like on a really micro level, it's like on that drive, if Tyreek Hill has a 70-yard touchdown, that's bad if you were starting Travis Kelce. But like on the whole, having Tyreek Hill in an offense was a net plus for, everyone that's a Chief, because even though sometimes he might take away all your points, like he's also making the team better. Right, he's making the offense better. He's part of the reason why everybody's excited to target the Chiefs, right? And maybe they can get that by committee this year. But I think that it's similar with Jamar Chase. Like, yes, on a given drive or in a given game, it's bad for T. Higgins that Chase is there. But also at a ceiling level, like the fact that Chase is there is part of what makes it such an explosive situation for T. Higgins. So I think that it does work both ways.
I want you to elaborate why that's a good thing
you actually have to put pressure
score
on defenses, right? Like TJ Hawkinson last year is a great example of this, where he might actually have a better year this year, where there's other players in the offense. They're a more competent team. Like TJ Hawkinson in and of himself is not an explosive player. And so when he was the best receiving option on the team, it wasn't a great situation for him, because all he was being able to get against defenses were these 6 and 7 yard dump off plays. He's getting doubled frequently, and he's not the type of player that can handle that type of attention. He's not a Devontae Adams, right? Whereas this year, you put Jameson Williams on the team, sometimes Jameson Williams is going to have a 60-yard touchdown catch, and that means there probably won't be a lot of fantasy points for Amon-Ra St. Brown and TJ Hawkinson on that particular drive. But from a season-long perspective, having a guy who can elevate their offense, who can create explosive plays, who can draw defensive attention, it's going to mean longer drives. It's going to mean that there's going to be more space to operate. So I think that, it's sort of a tight window where it's you might not want to have, you don't want to have Devontae Adams dropped onto your team taking a 30% target share, but you want other good players in an offense. If you're the only good player in an offense, the offense is going to be bad. You're going to look at what you look at with DJ Moore last year, or Terry McLaurin, where they're posting 28% target shares. They're obviously good, and they're like a wide receiver 3 because the entire offensive environment is just cratering them. Because if they're not scoring a touchdown, no one else is even getting a fucking first down.
It's also going to put pressure on the other team to score more often, and to put the ball away and to put up points. So it's essentially their teams, and it doesn't even have to be that week. It could be the next week, because the week before that team just put points. So let's try and put up points early and often, possibly throw more, increase the pace of play, have more plays run per game. So I just wanted to elaborate on that real quick so people understood exactly where we're going when we're talking about good offenses and bad offenses that we want to invest in. So let's go ahead and start out with our actual topic. Well, actually, before we do have one question. Jamie brings in, do you want Paris Campbell or DPJ?
I want a backup running back, literally any backup running back.
The right answer is DPJ, but Paris isn't that far off.
Dontrell Hilliard or Samaje Perine or Benny Snell.
You don't. No, definitely not Benny. Stop it with
definitely Benny Snell or Deontay Foreman, Matt Breida.
Deontay Foreman's a good one. Guys. No, not Matt Breida either. I think he's hurt, isn't he? Anyways, let's hop in.
Of course he is. He's Matt Breida.
Yeah, I don't know if he's hurt or not. I was just saying. I think he's hurt.
Did you hear, by the way, the reports that Bat Leonard was on a Good Football Show? By the way, you got to fix your Wi-Fi. You're a blurry mess. But Pat Leonard was on a Good Football Show. They were asking him what in the world is going to happen if Saquon Barkley goes down, because on one hand, everyone's like, Saquon Barkley's so injury prone. On the other hand, you look at their depth chart, it's has no one told the Giants? Because all they have is Matt Breida and Jayshawn Corbin and Gary Brightwell. And he said that they think Wan'Dale Robinson is not only the starting slot wide receiver, but the primary backup running back.
No, he's not. There's no way that a guy that's 170 pounds soaking wet is going to be the backup running back. That is
Matt Breida is probably 170 pounds soaking wet.
No, Matt Breida is 190, 200. Stop it.
They are going to be. It's Wan'Dale season. He's already the starting slot. He's so entrenched as a starter that he's not even going to have to play the first preseason game. That's how entrenched he is from camp. They're resting him in the first preseason game.
Oh my God. Kadarius Toney's going to be this year. That's all I got to say. All right. So let's go ahead and let's hop in.
Can he go 1 week without?
I think he's healthy. I saw he's healthy today.
And then Sleeper made a mistake. They made him healthy and then they made him questionable again. He didn't practice with a hamstring issue.
Damn it.
Billy had such a great tweet. He just posted the 2 images of the sleeper notifications of Kadarius Toney has been renamed healthy from questionable to he's been put as questionable from healthy, and it was this is Kadarius Toney's entire career.
I was literally going to take a screenshot of that and post something similar, and I'm really mad I didn't now because I was too busy. All right, let's go ahead and let's hop into this tonight's segment. We're going to talk about which teams we're in on, which teams we're out on in terms of offense and ADPs as to hey, I want to have these guys at their age. Should we make trades for them? Should we try to acquire any way possible? Draft leagues, like we said, are we drafting them? I'm going to be in on and take a little bit of more obvious, get an idea for what we're talking about, and that's going to be the Baltimore Ravens. Right now, the Baltimore Ravens, somewhat pretty. Their ADP is okay. I'm only one that I'd say is extremely too high is going to be like Mark Andrews. But I mean, he has that outcome in his range of possibilities. I feel like he's being drafted as ceiling right is, what his average output
God, I hate
would
that
be.
phrase.
What, drafted as ceiling?
I hate it. It drives me insane.
Why?
Because it just tilts me so much. Because it's like always used where it's like there's always like some upside player with like some form of situational factor, either like they're a rookie or there's another player on the depth chart, or we think they're going to pass less. It's always like, this guy's being drafted at his ceiling. I know we love the player being drafted at his ceiling. And it's like every player, like those are the players that aren't being drafted at their ceiling. Like those are the players where it's like some situational factor that doesn't relate to their talent is what's keeping them from being drafted at their ceiling. And their ceiling is like way beyond that. Like the players who are drafted at their ceiling are the players that everyone's like, that guy's going to beat his ADP. Because like that's the guy.
I mean, Mark Andrews is being drafted at borderline tight end 1 right now. I mean, like, and honestly, like we're talking about
first round pick.
You think that he should be a first pick?
He should be a first round pick. He absolutely produced first round pick level value last year. I mean, oh my gosh.
He's going to be tight end 5 this year.
Value over replacement. He 100% was worthy of a first round pick last year. And then you look at the situation, they lost the leading target runner on the freaking team. And so, okay, Bateman's going to take on some of those targets. Should we project
a lot of those targets
for a full on 25% target share? Well, I wouldn't, but I'd put him somewhere in the low 20s. But then we also lost. Then if you move Bateman even into that Hollywood role, well, then what happens to Bateman's old target share is, and what happens to Watkins' old target? James Prochet, Devin Duvernay. I mean, these guys can't play. So Mark Andrews, I mean, he's going to earn 1 million targets. He's always earned 1 million targets. It's just a matter of how much they throw, how many routes he runs. He's going to be out there, and he's going to be earning targets in a really good offense. I think he should be challenging Travis Kelce once again for tight end 1. I think the gap between them is actually too large.
Man, that's crazy to me. So we've seen what the Ravens do. Like the Ravens want to run the ball, and they made that when they traded away their number 1 receiver. And last year, ended up having to pass because their defense was fucking brutal. So this year, they fixed their defense. They had a ton of youth to it. They ended up adding a couple veterans to it, and they get a lot of healthy players back. I mean, we're going to see a completely different team. We have, sure, a Cleveland team that might have gotten better, maybe get a couple better games out of this. But I mean, Marcus isn't going to see much than what he saw last year. I mean, to see the type that he did. I mean, we don't know if he can stay healthy, and I understand that's something that should be frowned upon. Is talking about the health of players, but this is Mark Andrews here, who
fucking career.
No, he's always hurt. He's always banged up.
Not hurt.
Like he's always banged up. I didn't say injured. I said banged up, and it has hurt his production to an extent. I mean, I likely might even be. No, I'm just kidding. I can't go through with that one. I can't go through with one. But no. I mean, in all seriousness, like Mark Andrews, sure, could he be the tight end 1 this year? Maybe, but I could see Dalton Schultz finishing ahead of him, and I don't even care about saying that.
I can't wait to talk about the team that I'm avoiding, which is the perfect segue. I'm avoiding the Dallas Cowboys. And this is a great example of what you're saying. It's about at their ADP. I don't think the Dallas Cowboys are one of the worst offenses in the league or anything like that. I think that everything that I was saying before about players in good offenses in general, often having this contingent value, players that aren't having their projections maxed out to what they're capable of because of other options around them. Not in Dallas. In Dallas, we are turning up the dials because they have essentially 2 players that have shown a capability in the NFL of earning targets to any extent, that being CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz. And neither to an extreme extent. I mean, CeeDee Lamb has been a 20 to 21% targets per route run player. Dalton Schultz has been an 18% to 19% targets per route run player. And beyond that, it is a wasteland. I mean, Michael Gallup, we'll see when he comes back, and we'll see what he looks like when he comes back. James Washington broke his foot. He's not going to be a factor. He's also James Washington. Then we have Jalen Tolbert, who, I mean, he's going to like the 12th round or the 10th round right now on Underdog. It's insane. But
you won't see that in redraft leagues. You won't see him go that high in redraft.
No, I hope not. But he's like, in terms of just even the functionality in the offense, like I get he has good camp reports. He's interesting. He's athletic. He's big. He's also an overaged, late breakout 3rd round wide receiver from South Alabama. Like This is not like they went and dropped like Garrett Wilson in here or Chris Olave. Like Jalen Tolbert is a low probability bet who happens to fall into a great situation in which he'll have an opportunity to succeed. But we have no idea if he's any good. And beyond that, it's like Noah Brown and Simi Fehoko and TJ Vasher, a bunch of scrubs. So the issue with that is like CeeDee Lamb he actually is, in my opinion, being priced at his ceiling because you look at what he's accomplished in his career.
Did you see him beat Trayvon Diggs in training camp?
Yeah, who doesn't? Unfortunately, it's not that much. I saw Simi Fehoko beat Trayvon Diggs, by the way. I mean, CeeDee Lamb, if you look at, I put up the tweet the other day, his targets per route run, his yards per route run, his target share, and his air yard share. It's like entirely 1-for-1 comparison to Jerry Jeudy through 2 years. He's just in this situation where people are expected to take the next step up. I think that of all the wide receivers that haven't gotten into that elite tier yet, he's probably the most likely to. But at the same time, he's also priced like he's already done it. So I struggle with him. Schultz is just, I mean, that ADP is an unmitigated disaster. The fact that he's going in the 6th round is egregious. He's a dad running tight end who everything we just talked about with TJ Hawkinson and not being able to succeed when he's the focus of a defense. And that's Dalton Schultz. I talk about the Barnage Index, which is every year the tight ends that appear out of nowhere and are unlikely to maintain their production. Dalton Schultz is the poster boy of the Barnage Index this year. Could he finish tight end 6 that he's being drafted at? Yeah, that's entirely plausible. I'm fine with him being ranked at tight end 6. But the idea that he's being drafted close to George Kittle and Darren Waller is obscene. And then everybody else, I mean, it's like Zeke, who's kind of a dead zone back. Pollard, who interests me, but he's really pricey for what his profile is outside of his contingent value. I'm avoiding Schultz outright. I'm avoiding Zeke entirely. I'm mixing in some Lamb and some Pollard because they're players I want to draft, but I don't think that the cost is very palatable. And Dak is a guy who I think is really being overdrafted because all the years that he's been this elite fantasy option have come with elite fantasy options around him. And now, to me, he's a guy, I'm not entirely convinced he'll outscore Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr this year.
So let's talk about Schultz real quick because over what is 24 and 25 season, he's accumulated, let's see, about 1,420 yards, right?
Accumulated is a fantastic word to describe what he does.
That's fine. I mean, he's out there, 16 games, whatever. Yeah, but over his age 24 and age 25, he put up about 1,400, a little bit over 1,400 yards. This other tight end, I want you to guess who he is in his age 24 and 25 season. 1,500 yards, 1,550, about 150 yards more. Who is that tight end?
I'm going to guess that you're talking about Mark Andrews, who was in an offense that threw, I don't know, about maybe 400 less attempts, and Mark Andrews had like a fraction of the route participation. And while Mark Andrews was posting, let's see here, let's take a look at the talent profile here. If I back up the bus here to tight end, I'm pulling this up on the fly here. Let's see. Okay, 2019 yards per route run. Mark Andrews is at 2.89. Wow, that's pretty darn good. And then 2020, which was the other season that you had in the mix there, Mark Andrews, 2 yards per route run. Okay, so he averaged 2.45. That's completely elite. And let's see with Dalton Schultz. 1.11 in 2020. That's not very good. That's behind Jimmy Graham. And then 1.47 right next.
But
to
if they're
Zach
throwing the
Ertz,
ball
who's
so much more, why does it matter?
true.
If they're throwing the ball more, why does it matter?
Because this is exactly what I'm talking about in terms of people that are being drafted at their ceiling. If the entire case for a player is like there's nobody else around them, they're going to have all this pass volume, and the case isn't based on their innate talent, that's a guy that's being drafted at his ceiling because it's a guy where all of the positive things that can happen are already factored in. He already has all of his contingent value maxed up. He's already projected for all the pass volume. There's nowhere to go. He's already we've maxed out the dials on what Dalton Schultz can be. Like I said, he can be the tight end 6. That's entirely possible. I probably rank him as the tight end 6.
He finishes as tight end 3 last.
No. In this house, we use points per game, Mr. Vernon. We do not accept things like he was the tight end 3. He accumulated his way to a tight end 3 in overall fantasy production. What was he in points per game? Let's see here.
I'm trying to look it up on the fly.
He
as
was
you're
the tight
talking.
end 6, which is probably what he could be. Oh no, that's a tight end premium, which was Schultz premium last year because he was accumulating over and over again. Let's see.
No.
What do we have here?
He was
in
tight end
half PPR points per game. Yeah, he was the tight end 6. Well, tight end 5 if you don't count Taysom Hill.
Yeah, wait.
So he was
Yeah, I mean, he was still. Yeah, he was in there. He was fine. He wasn't
bad. He wasn't bad. Yeah, he was behind Mark Andrews. He'll be behind.
And now you're talking about
Kelsey,
the vacated targets.
And he'll be behind Kittle. And he actually was ahead of Waller, but Waller was really injured. And then he'll be and then Kyle Pitts was behind him, but we're projecting Kyle Pitts to take a little level up.
Dalton Schultz, tight end 1. We both agree. Let's go ahead and move on to the next.
He's a tight end 1. Dalton Schultz.
So you went with the team you're fading. I might as well go with the team that I am high on and talk about Carolina. Carolina's in a weird situation. We got Baker Mayfield coming in, and everybody's just completely given up on the entire Carolina team. I mean, even DJ Moore, who was sneaking in the second round back in 2021, just isn't seeing the type of love that he was seeing in previous years. Now, Baker Mayfield's deep ball completion percentage wasn't great. It was slightly better than the other quarterbacks that DJ Moore had to play with. But the thing was Baker Mayfield wasn't in the same offensive system that he was in 2019, which is almost the same system that he should be in 2022. And in 2019, he saw number 7 in deep ball attempts. He was number 4 in money throws, according to playerprofiler.com. And although he saw pressure, the 30th most out of listed quarterbacks, he ended up still having a decent completion percentage. Meanwhile, he was able to support multiple fantasy assets or multiple fantasy options. And I mean, outside of DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey, of course, I mean, nobody else is even being drafted on Carolina. I mean, Anderson is going
probably smart on that one.
maybe, but I mean, at the same time, there's a chance that Terrace Marshall or Robbie Anderson or somebody else from this offense could end up giving you something more than what we're seeing. I mean, honestly, I would pick Terrace Marshall more because Terrace Marshall could end up being the slot guy over there, and Baker Mayfield loves the slot. He even loved the slot back in 2019.
Right. You know who did he like throwing to in the slot in 2019?
Baker Mayfield?
Yeah.
Jarvis Landry.
Well, and then how about in 2020? Rashard Higgins, the actual starting slot wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers.
Oh my God! You're really pulling Rashard Higgins into this, huh?
Look, if he liked throwing into the slot, he brought his slot wide receiver with him to Carolina. There it is, Rashard Higgins.
You think he's going to go Higgins?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think Marshall, unfortunately, I love Marshall as a prospect, but I mean, you know what happens to these guys it's one thing to faceplant the way that Rondale Moore faceplanted, where it's he wasn't as good as we hoped and the market's kind of down on him. Terrace Marshall, essentially went on sabbatical. He faceplanted. It was rough. So I'm struggling to see a Terrace Marshall resuscitation. I don't know of anyone who came back from a rookie year quite that bad that had legitimate draft capital. It's not like he was a guy who was drafted in round 7 and didn't get a chance. He was a day 1 starter for them. He was a day 1 starter, and he just totally fell on his face. So I'm wary of Marshall, but he's free. So he's not going to cost anything. Go for it. I love McCaffrey, obviously. I'm down with DJ Moore. The only thing with Moore is I think you have to love Baker a little bit. And maybe you've talked me into it a little bit with Baker because he goes pretty decisively above McLaurin. And then the two of them go pretty decisively above Deontay Johnson. And I kind of look at those 3 as being in kind of a similar situation where there are these target dominant players with these quarterbacks who are highly questionable individuals. But Moore, he has the youth. He's got Baker, who I think is probably more likely to be good than Wentz, and certainly more likely to be good than Mitch Trubisky. So you told me a little bit. Robbie Anderson in a best ball is fine. He got a lot of targets last year. He had like 110 targets last year.
Dude, I'm nervous about Robbie Anderson, I think, more than you are. But, I mean, so I did an article for Fantasy
ADP would
Diehards.
have to be higher for me to get nervous about Robbie Anderson.
I did this article for Football Diehards, right, with Bob Harris over there. And I ended up breaking down the difference for wide receivers and, head coaches changing teams. But in the meanwhile, I found out how, like, great Freddie Kitchens was for Baker Mayfield. I mean, Baker Mayfield saw 534 attempts in the year Freddie Kitchens was head coach. I mean, the snaps per game were like way up. The targets per game, the average depth of target was way up for a lot of these players. I mean, when Stefanski came in, you saw everything drop off by 2 or 3 yards, in terms of Baker Mayfield's stats. So I just feel like if he gets into an offense that is more of the Air Coryell like type system, I feel like Baker Mayfield could take back off. I mean, he has a strong arm, and we've seen him put it on display on multiple occasions. Plus, I mean, he had Odell Beckham injured for all of 2020, 2021. He was dealing with a shoulder injury. We just didn't see a lot of, advantageous situations. And so although I don't love Baker Mayfield, and I kind of talked myself into it when I was walking my dog today, I was like, okay, I'm starting to like Baker Mayfield the more and more I look into it. I should say I like DJ Moore, and I've always loved DJ Moore. I like him more and more because I think it could give him an opportunity to see more touchdowns, big plays. I don't think DJ Moore is being drafted as ceiling. I don't think that, obviously Robbie Anderson, Terrace Marshall. I don't think anybody is even being paid any mind. In fact, it might be one of the least drafted teams in the NFL.
That's for sure. Yeah, it is. Because there's just so few guys. I got to look and see how many Panthers I even have any percentage of in best ball, because I obviously have McCaffrey shares. I have more shares. I have some Robbie. I think I've taken Baker once, maybe. I've definitely taken Deontay Foreman in the 18th round, and I might have taken. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, Deontay Foreman could be the biggest steal in the entire draft. It's completely absurd to me.
Yeah, I like Foreman because I think like when you get into round 18, there are not that many backups that are for sure the backup by that point in time. Like there's a lot of these ambiguous, like, I don't know, who's the backup in Kansas City? It could be any of 3 guys. Who's the backup in Arizona? It could be any of 3 guys. Like there's a lot of those.
Yeah, the only other guy is Eno Benjamin. That's for sure the lock backup over there. Eno season, let's go! Eno! You already know I'm stoked about that.
Eno Benjamin podcast.
God, man, it's been too long.
And we're gonna. Oh my God, could you imagine if, like, not to wish any harm on James Conner, but if he could just have like a nice 4-week hamstring pull that like doesn't affect his livelihood, and we get a month of just talking about Eno Benjamin for an hour on this show until Shane eventually leaves us permanently, I would have so much fun if we just get to.
I would cry, dude.
Every week.
God.
Yeah, but Foreman is like Chuba Hubbard is cheeks. And like normally beat reporters always have incumbent bias. I've been listening. I mentioned a Good Football Show with New York earlier. They had the guy from Carolina on there too, and they were asking him what's going to happen in the backfield. And they were like, well, it's going to be McCaffrey, obviously. They're like, the coaching staff wants to use Foreman in certain situations, but like, who knows if they're actually going to, or if they're just going to go back to providing McCaffrey 100% of the time. So I think there's some chance that he actually gets some work, but then they're like, what if McCaffrey gets hurt? And they're like, yeah, it's Foreman. Like, Chuba sucks. It's basically like the too long don't read. So I think it'll be Foreman, and I think he's one of the more locked in number 2s. And he was good last year. He won't be able to do the pass game type of stuff that Christian McCaffrey did, but he's a good value pick, I think.
Love that. Jamie comes in and asks real quick, what are you trading Baker for in Dynasty? I have him in a league, and I'm holding him. Like, I think you should hold him if you have him. I wouldn't trade him at all. Unless somebody offered me, obviously 2 quarterback league, right? So somebody would have to offer me probably an early 2nd round pick, or what I would project to be an early 2nd round pick.
Yeah, that's fine with me. Yeah, early 2 is fine with me.
All right. Well, sorry, our trade correspondent is not here. Shane is missing.
That's true. Trade alert. Well, you mentioned that there's not a lot of players getting drafted from Carolina. And one of those reasons, I guess, because they also just don't have a tight end, like, or maybe just nobody knows who it is. Maybe they don't exist.
Ian Thomas? Question mark?
I think Tommy Trimble is the guy. I don't know.
So on the official depth chart, it's still Ian Thomas.
Yeah, but Ian
Technically.
Thomas, like, he's like the Chris Hogan of tight ends. Like, I remember he was running like 40 routes a game 2 years ago and seeing like one target. It was
So
ridiculous.
bad, dude. I've never seen a tight end like that.
It's so bad. He was basically like, they had the two Thomases. It was like every week you'd look at the box score in 2020 and it was like, oh, Logan Thomas and Ian Thomas each ran 100% of the routes. And Logan Thomas had a 20% target share and Ian Thomas was never targeted once. It was like every week. Anyway, beyond Ian Thomas, you mentioned a team that was not getting a lot of players drafted as being Carolina. Another one who's not getting a lot of players drafted is the Chicago Bears. I looked through my best ball exposures, and I have only drafted 4 members of the Chicago Bears franchise so far in over 150 drafts, mostly because I haven't drafted a single share of David Montgomery. But that leaves only Fields, Mooney, Kmet, Herbert. Obviously, people do draft Montgomery. The rest of their players on an average draft don't get drafted. They don't even have a third wide receiver that gets drafted in the majority of drafts. It's pretty crazy.
So real quick to that point, Chicago itself, for the Scott Fish Bowl, the third least amount of players that got drafted was Philly. They got drafted, or 1,523 players got drafted from Philly.
Yeah.
New York Giants had 1,506. They were the second least amount drafted. Chicago, 1,309. So 200 less players got drafted from Chicago than any other team in the Scott Fish Bowl. That's crazy. That's nuts.
That's nail on the head. And I misspoke. It's not they don't have a wide receiver 3 drafted. They don't have a wide receiver 2 drafted. That's crazy. There's some player who's probably who's gonna be their starter in 2 wide receiver sets, and we just don't even draft them.
Who's that gonna be? Velus Jones probably will have some role.
Well, I didn't say I know who the player will be. I said there will be.
I'm asking.
I don't know who it is. Equinemius St. Brown?
It's gonna be Equinemius St. Brown. That's exactly what it's gonna be. In the slot, a 6'5" slot receiver to hog target.
Just depressing. Anyway, I look at this with this team, and I mean, it's just a tire fire, right? Like I understand the appeal of Fields. He runs the ball, and I love quarterbacks that run the ball. But every possible element you don't want in a fantasy environment is what's going on here. They're going to be slow as balls. The Green Bay guy, I talked about him on the show the other day. He was assistant to the regional manager of offensive relations in Green Bay. Like they had Aaron Rodgers as the real offensive coordinator. Matt LaFleur was the head coach who called the plays. Then you had Nathaniel Hackett, who was the offensive coordinator, didn't call plays. And Luke Getsy is like his assistant. So it's like we have fourth in command in Green Bay is now calling the plays in Chicago. I'm not sure he ever looked at a play sheet in Green Bay. But they ran the slowest offense in the NFL. He's going to come in there. He's going to slow things down. They have Fields, who was not good in real life last year. They have Mooney, who is a nice player, really overmatched, in my opinion, as a wide receiver 1. I mean, he's a guy who's like 5'10", 175 pounds, primarily played in the slot, was not efficient, even on a high degree of volume. Lovely player. But I think like if you have a good wide receiver core, he's your wide receiver 3. If you have if you have a good one, he's your wide receiver 2. If you have a great one, he's your wide receiver 3. And if you're the Bears, he's your wide receiver 1. Cole Kmet, I mean, it's like the Hawkinson, but he's like poverty Hawkinson. Like we talked about how it's troubling for a tight end to be in a situation where like, yeah, you're getting volume, but there's everyone's paying attention to you and you can't quite stand up to it. Like Cole Kmet is like poverty, great value, Dollar Tree, TJ Hawkinson. And then, yeah, you have Velus Jones, who was born while the American War of Independence was going on and just graduated college. You have Equinemius St. Brown, who is like a total jag. And then all their other wide receivers got hurt. So it's just not a conducive environment, right? I don't want to be drafting their wide receivers. I don't want to draft Fields. I don't want to be drafting Montgomery, who's a guy who has never been particularly effective. He has only been fantasy viable because he had the 4th highest opportunity share among all running backs last year. Now he's in an outside zone scheme, which is a horrible fit for him. He's an inside, like tackle breaking runner. He does not have the speed to get to the edge at all. He is not a guy who's going to make decisive cutbacks. So I think Herbert eventually carves out a larger share of his backfield. I think Ebner could play some of that outside zone stuff. I think we're looking at like a committee backfield, slow, bad offense. Just not a place where I want to be investing capital. And I don't want to be chasing volume in these spots where I'm just like, well, they got to throw it to Mooney. They got to throw it to Komet. I think that's a low ceiling approach.
You know what's crazy is well, it'd be crazy, I should say, is when Darrington Evans actually is starting running back because he fits
He's a good fit
better
for the
in this
outside.
system than any other like running back. There's a reason why he ended up with the Tennessee Titans. It's because he has the acceleration, the burst, and then the know-how to find that seam and get upfield. And honestly, Darrington Evans, like I understand people taking Khalil Herbert, stuff like that, but like Darrington Evans is the real value here, especially in dynasty leagues, or somebody just to. If he does make the team, if he does, I just like if he gets an opportunity, I'm just saying he could end up blasting through that depth chart.
I agree with you. I've always been a Darrington stan. I liked him in Appalachian State. I liked him in Tennessee last year. He was like
He
one
just
of my
couldn't
most
stay healthy
drafted players last year in best ball, unfortunately. Yeah, I agree. I think he would be good if he ever got an opportunity. I don't know if it'll happen because I think Khalil Herbert's a really good player. I agree that maybe he doesn't have like the 4.3 speed, but he's a decisive runner. He's got more wheels than David Montgomery for sure. I think Herbert can execute this scheme pretty effectively.
Yeah, I agree with you. And honestly, I don't have pretty much any shares. I cannot stand Chicago's team this year. This is going to be an ugly team. I don't want anything to do with Chicago on either side of the ball, like in terms of like, hey, I want to try and target teams that are going to be playing Chicago later in the season.
No, because it's just going to be a slow, defensive.
It's going to be a slow, ugly game. Which is kind of what scared me off of Detroit, but I'm going to go ahead and pick Detroit. I'm going to go ahead and take Detroit because I think that Detroit, the value of the players is completely fallen off. I mean, don't forget, we're one season removed from, hey, is Hawkinson a top 3 tight end? And now all of a sudden he's like tight end 6 or 7 in drafts. And it's kind of like
got to take Schultz first. Got to get Schultz ahead of him.
Dude, I think I have Hawkinson above Schultz. I mean,
there you go.
I think TJ Hawkins is tight end 0. And then we have Schultz as tight end 1. No, but I mean, I like Hawkinson. I always have liked Hawkinson. I think that his efficiency can absolutely increase. I think that we're talking about Jameson Williams being able to stretch the field. He's going to get some splash plays. I don't know if I draft him necessarily, but I'm definitely taking him in best ball. In terms of redraft, still kind of testing the waters on him a little bit to see where he goes. If he falls, I'm taking him absolutely. Jared Goff, though, how could Jared Goff not be a value? I mean, they're going to design this offense to get the ball out of Jared Goff's hands as quickly as freaking possible, which is going to have defense playing up. It's going to create opportunities for Jameson Williams. Meanwhile, you have DJ Chark, who is dominating, they said, all over the field. He's actually looks better in the slot than Amon-Ra St. Brown does. I mean, like, there are so many options on this offense, and nobody is getting any kind of attention. Their defense has improved slightly. They should remain more competitive in games. Like, I could just see passing attempts out the ass for these guys moving forward. And, of course, my sweetheart, DeAndre Swift.
Love it. I don't have anything to add. I'm pretty in on everybody on the Lions. Like, I'm in on Swift 100%. I'm in on St. Brown 100%. I'm not, like, super enthused about Hawk. I don't love drafting these mid-range tight ends, but I think that he's, like, a pretty decent value where he's going.
Hawkinson or Goddard?
So it depends a little on the format. Like in like a managed tight end premium format, Hawkinson for sure, because I think he has like the stable role. He's like, I think should be favored to be at least second on his team in targets, and he's actually live to lead his team in targets. Whereas Goddard, I think, is more like at best second on his team in targets and more likely third. In a best ball format, I might go Goddard because Goddard gets that downfield work that very few tight ends get. It's very appealing. He can actually have 25, 30-yard receptions, which you normally don't see out of tight ends. And then he has that contingent value where, like, if Brown or Smith were to get hurt, like Goddard now is starting to profile to me more like a Darren Waller. So
plus Hawkinson runs towards safeties. Hawkinson runs towards safeties versus away from them. Has the ball in his hands. God, I still can't get over that play. I will never get over that play.
Yeah. That's my.
Do you know what play I'm talking about when he played Chicago on Thanksgiving?
Yeah. I was that on Thanksgiving.
Yes, and Hawkinson had a straight line.
Field, and then he just ran right at the safety.
Yeah, he had a straight line to the end zone, and he ran at the safety instead. Oh, I lost so much money on that play. I'll never forget it. It's probably the number one play that I'll remember in all of football for the rest of my life.
That was truly hilarious. I greatly enjoyed that absurd play. But no, Hawkinson, he's in a tight end premium format. He becomes a lot more interesting because he could rack up, pretty easily a 22, 23% target share. I think that's possible.
All right. So are you hopping onto your last team that you're out on right now?
Yeah, sure. You know what? I don't know if I'll have time to get to all those. Let's do one that I'm in on. Let's get positive. I'm in on the New
That's
Orleans
like a negative.
Saints.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm in on the New Orleans Saints. Because
They're looking better every freaking day.
they have a lot of good players, first of all, right? And this is one of those situations where, okay, like I mentioned with Chicago, they're really slow. New Orleans has been really slow for a while. But I think that some of the factors that made them this slow might be going away, right? Who was in charge of the offense? Sean Payton. I know Pete Carmichael was there too, but ultimately it was Sean Payton's show. He was the one that dictated it. Drew Brees, of course, was like the quarterback for a lot of this. And, he wanted to run things how he wanted to run things. And then you had this team where they had this elite defense for the last 5 or so years. And their offense was really regressing. You had Brees just regressing as a player. Then you had Jameis Winston coming in with this absolute skeleton crew around him. I mean, they were rolling out guys that played wide receiver for the Saints last year, included such illustrious people as Kevin White, Kenny Stills.
I just put out a tweet for Marquez Callaway.
Yeah, Marquez Callaway had an 18% target share on this team last year. He had 100 targets. Like that's a thing that happened. Yeah.
Now Tre'Quan Smith is the wide receiver 5 on this roster.
Right. Callaway went from everybody moved down 3 pegs. Like Callaway went from like the wide receiver 1 to not even starting. Tre'Quan Smith is like a total backup. Oh my God, Troutman. Deontay Hardy went from like a rotational player to even less of a rotational player. But they and 3 wide receivers, right? They got Thomas back, who Michael Thomas, say what you want about his injury history. He has never been on the field and not good. The only time he didn't score fantasy points, he was still leading the league in air yards. He was still getting a 30% target share. He had a player who's now their backup tight end throwing him passes at quarterback, right? That's why he wasn't scoring fantasy points. So Michael Thomas never been on the field.
Completely do a 180 on Michael Thomas. Like, I got so mad after our show last week that I have so few shares of Michael Thomas.
You do a 180. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because
been on Michael Thomas.
I've been so out on Michael Thomas in basketball, and then I'm seeing the reports. And then after our show last week, literally, I'm like going through my basketball. I'm like checking my Michael Thomas shares. I'm like, son of a bitch, I don't have enough Michael Thomas. I'm gonna lose in every single freaking basketball league because I don't have Michael Thomas.
So he's back. You get Olave coming in. You get Landry, who frankly would have been by far the best wide receiver on this team last year. He's now your wide receiver 3. You get Kamara, looks like he's going to play 17 games. Winston's out there. He's potentially healthy. You get a new play caller. What if they decide, like, let's open things up a little bit, right? What if they don't need to play this slow, like, plotting game plan anymore because they actually have players back on their teams? Like the Saints once upon a time were a high-flying offense until all these factors came on board. So I think there's a chance that they do open things up, that they use their playmakers. And I want to be on all these guys. Like I'm in on Thomas. I'm pretty in on Olave at his cost, especially in redraft formats. I don't even mind Landry late. I'm not in on Adam Troutman, but
what?
I'll allow.
How are you not in on Adam Troutman? He does not suck. The offense sucks. You just talked about how bad the offense was last year, and now you're slandering the god of all tight ends. Like this is the second biggest.
I'll take Taysom Hill.
No, not over Adam Troutman. Adam Troutman's going to be just watch.
Adam Troutman. Oh my God.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and get negative here since Jacob's getting positive. All 3 of my teams, we decided to switch teams on one of them. All 3 of my teams are actually going to be in the NFC West. I mean, the NFC West this year is going to be a dumpster fire in terms of fantasy production. And it's not because we're going to see no production come out of that division. I think we're going to see different levels of production from each team in terms of individual players. For example, start off the Rams. The Rams, we have Cooper Kupp, right? Who, ended up, if he still reduced his production by 13% last year, he still would have been the wide receiver 1. However, he didn't have a healthy wide receiver 2 on the team outside of Van Jefferson. He didn't have a healthy tight end on the roster outside of, I don't even know who was on the roster last year. Jacob Harris. It was bad. Tyler Hagee was hurt for the majority of the year, if not injured.
No, he played
And
the entire year. He was just hurt in the Super Bowl.
he was hurt throughout the season. He was not healthy the entire season.
He's just bad.
Let me go ahead and let me look that up as I talk. Maybe he was just bad. But either way, like, you still have these offensive weapons. Of course, Cam Akers comes back, and yet we're treating Cooper Kupp, we're treating Allen Robinson almost as if like this offense can support all these guys. And this offense only supported one fantasy relevant player for the entire season in Cooper Kupp. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, I mean, and of course Matt Stafford. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, I just don't see that happening where you could have all these guys drafted in the top 5-6 rounds, including Allen Robinson, and still see high-end production.
Yeah, it's an expensive spot. And I mean, I talked last week about Allen Robinson, and I'm not very in on Allen Robinson. And it's a tough one for me to get in on them because Kupp, obviously he deserves his draft position where he's going. But then, yeah, it's tough. Like, I'm not particularly wanting to be aggressive on Cam Akers post Achilles, and Allen Robinson's too pricey for me. And it's like, if I want to make bets against those top guys, there's no one to do it with in this offense. Like, Tyler Higbee's Tyler Higbee. He is what he is. He's a tight end too. Van Jefferson is not, really a relevant fantasy player in my estimation. They might sign Odell Beckham still to come start playing for them in November again. And the only guy that I'm really, really on is Darrell Henderson, honestly, super late. But other than that, it's a fade for me on the Rams. I agree.
Yeah, so just to give you a heads up, Tyler Higbee did play the majority of his games, but there were certain games where he did deal with injuries to his knee. And it was kind of funny because it was the best games that he was playing that he dealt with injuries to his knee with. So it's kind of funny how, like, he played 100% of snaps and he only saw 2 targets, but then he only played 60% of snaps and he saw 6 targets that game.
Oh, I'm aware of him and his snap rate because every single week, you'd look at his usage and be like, oh, Tyler Higbee, 85% of the routes. It's only 3,200 in DFS. Let's pop Higbee in there at the double stack. He'd have like 3 catches for 25 yards again. Like, well, see you next week, Tyler.
God, it's such a pain in the ass. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to continue on with the rant of the NFC West. I'm going to go with the 49ers. We saw these reports coming out with Brandon Ayuk, and Brandon Ayuk's practicing with Trey Lance. And guess what? They did spend all of the second team reps last year together because Brandon Ayuk was in the doghouse. So, of course, they already have this rapport they've developed throughout the past 2 seasons. However, we have Deebo Samuel going super high. He wants less touches in the backfield, which is what he was really good at. So he's going to see a reduction in touches most likely. We have Brandon Ayuk, who is now flying up draft boards, and I just don't see where the value is for Ayuk because Trey Lance likes to target one person and one person only through the majority of his reads, and I believe that's what Shanahan is going to have him do, very similar to what he did with quarterbacks and Pierre Garçon when he was on the team with the Washington Commanders, and he was on the team with the 49ers back when Kyle Shanahan first came over. And then we saw him hyper target Julio Jones in Atlanta. Kyle Shanahan called those plays to get the ball out of the hands of the quarterback quicker. I just don't see where Brandon Ayuk adds value from week to week and where you can feel safe starting him. Meanwhile, George Kittle should be on a path to redemption last year after spending most of the year blocking. The whole running backfield is a complete shit show. I am out of the 49ers 100%. There's only one player that I'm drafting on a consistent basis, and that is Juan Jennings.
Yeah, it's a tough one. In best ball, I think about with the field on Deebo. I'm a little nervous on Deebo just because he's the one that has the most to lose because he's the one that's being drafted so highly. Like, George Kittle feels pretty safe to me because even if his role is really up and down and he's not, posting the type of target share that he has in the past, like just by a function of playing tight end, he's still giving you a positional advantage with his ceiling on any given week that I'm comfortable paying, around 4, around 5 price to get George Kittle's ceiling on my lineup, even if I know when I click that button that it's not going to actually manifest every single week in the way that it will for like a Travis Kelce. I'm fine with him. Ayuk is a guy that is very format dependent and honestly similar to Devonta Smith is a guy that I feel this way about too, where in best ball, I really love targeting Brandon Ayuk because I don't have to deal with when to start him. He's playing in an offense that I expect to be good and score points. He's a good player. He's going to be running downfield routes. And so I think that he's going to be, a really helpful player in a best ball format. In a managed format, I agree with you. I'm not a big fan of Ayuk in managed. I want to have my starting wide receivers taken care of before he comes off the board. But if they aren't, I'm looking at guys that I think can be a little bit more projectable, because I just see him as a guy where by week 4, week 5, whatever, later upside wide receivers that I've taken that hit, I'm going to be, am I going to want to start this? Might sound blasphemous. In a managed league, in a managed PPR league, am I going to want to put Brandon Ayuk in my lineup over Wan'Dale Robinson? If Wan'Dale Robinson is playing 80% of the snaps and he's getting 8 targets out of the slot, and I know that he has a PPR
because they're playing the spread
versus Ayuk, is going to be seeing 6 targets a game, and so sometimes that's 5 for 90 and 1, and sometimes it's 2 for 20 and 0, right? So to me, he's a best ball only pick, not a managed pick, and that's been a weird scenario with him where I really believe in the player profile. So I've been kind of on edge with him in Dynasty. I've been avoiding in redraft. I've been buying in best ball. The only guy to me that's a massive target for the 49ers is Trey Lance, because just whatever happens with the rest of the offense, I'm fine with Lance, because he's either going to be throwing it at somebody or he's going to be running it himself. I'm fully comfortable with him scoring fantasy points. How he's able to assist others around him in scoring fantasy points is an open question.
We could see essentially Jalen Hurts 2.0 for this upcoming season, where it's
possible.
It's great.
You got to make bad for.
Got to make the decision, Joe Burrow or Trey Lance. So if you're Josh Larkey,
Trey Lance. Trey Lance.
So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this last one for the negative one, but obviously I want to announce it. The Seahawks. I don't understand why DK Metcalf's going so high. I just don't understand anybody over there. I don't think we need to talk about it that much, but the only one that I actually like the value on is Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, I kind of agree.
All right, let's go ahead and finish off with your positives. If you want to do 2 or 1, up to you.
Yeah, well, I did 1 already with the Saints, but I have 1 more positive left, and I mean, I've teased them. I talked about them every week, but I'm just continuing to bang the drum for the New York Giants. New York Giants are the fun bad team in 2021 or 2022. I felt this way about the Lions last year. I thought they were the fun bad team in 2021, and we got a lot of fantasy value out of Swift. We got a lot of fantasy value out of St. Brown. Hawkinson kind of disappointed, but he was still an every week starter while he was available. And I feel that way about the Giants, because if you're going to be a bad team, like, you need to have a couple things going in your favor. One of those is you need to have a coach who's willing to play aggressively, right? You don't want to have a coach like Joe Judge who is running QB sneaks on 3rd and 9 when you're down, right? You don't even want to have like Arthur Smith on the Falcons last year. It was like the first week they were down by like 17 points in the 3rd quarter, and they're running draw plays on 3rd down. And it was like, oh, okay, well, I guess the Falcons aren't going to be any fun this year in fantasy in games that they're down. But like, I just get the feeling with Dable and with Kafka, like, they're trying to build up a culture in New York. And with where they come from, I mean, it's Dable from the Bills, Kafka from the Chiefs. These are teams that play fast. These are teams that pass. These are teams that play a fun spread offense style with a lot of motion. And look at the players they have, right? Wan'Dale Robinson, Kadarius Toney. You look at how they're being used all over the formation. They're constantly setting people in motion. They're constantly running multiple guys in the backfield between Saquon, Toney, and Wan'Dale. I mean, it's a really incredible offense where you have 2 players that can functionally play quarterback in Daniel Jones and Toney. You have 3 players that can essentially play running back, with Toney can spin at 60 yards downfield. Like, he's a legit.
Oh, I know. He's a legit quarterback.
Threat. Yeah. And then you have Toney and Wan'Dale.
I love seeing you come around on Toney just so much. I know we talk about this on a weekly basis, but like, oh my God, you are just coming around on Toney so hard.
Big Toney.
It's getting me excited. I
hope it happens. They got like 2 guys. I mean, if you were to design an offensive system that's perfect for Toney and Wan'Dale's skill set, it's totally this one. And I love the idea that they have both of them. Like, they just have these shifty guys who are going to be in space. It really dovetails with Daniel Jones' best attribute, which is running the ball, not throwing the ball. And then you have Golladay doing what he's doing.
Until he trips.
Which is not much, but I'm really enjoying sort of the spread system. And if you just think about, like, when they're falling behind in games, which they will do, and they're going to be passing, they're going to be playing at a high pace, like, Tony and Wandale's games suit that perfectly, right? You're just going to see these PPR points. Tony, Wandale, Tony, Wandale, Tony, Wandale. You know, they're going to have some games, I think, where these guys have like 12 targets for 8 catches and 90 yards, and they're just racking up points for you in the second half, kind of like an Amon-Ra St. Brown was last year over the final 6 weeks, where he's just racking up PPR points week in, week out. So that's an environment that I'm pretty happy to invest in. By the way, I have one more note from A Good Football Show, which you will be fired up about. He said that Colin 2Ls Johnson, is running circles around Kenny Golladay in camp.
Let's go! Let's go, baby! That's what I'm talking about. Let's go! Let's go, Colin Johnson! Woo!
So who knows? Maybe
Colin
they'll
Johnson season.
maybe they'll demote Kenny Golladay. I've never heard anyone, by the way, get roasted as hard as Kenny Golladay got roasted by New York Giants beat reporter Pat Leonard. He was like, it was so bad. He was like, Colin with 2 L's Johnson is running circles around him. If I didn't see the name on the back of the number, I would think Colin Johnson was Kenny Golladay. Golladay looks like his fire is gone. His body is broken. It was like, they were basically just like, this dude cannot play football anymore. And like, and it's also just like, you think about the offense that they're running now. It's like Golladay is the most absurdly bad fit, right? It's just you have all these like speedy guys in the spread, and Golladay is just like out there posting up on air. Like,
so I mean, you still need the Gabriel Davis. You know, you still need that possession receiver, and also you need a guy in the red zone, and that's either going to be Bellinger, or that's going to be Bellinger, or that's going to be Colin Johnson. So
Colin Johnson.
The funniest thing about Colin Johnson, right, is you watch like all of his like every single play that he's run in the red zone, and he's open in the red zone on every single play, but he's meant to be the decoy. But the defense knows that he's meant to be the decoy, so they don't cover him. And he's just sitting there wide open, like with his hands up, like, hey, I'm right here the whole time. And yet they never.
Tucker just sitting in the corner waiting to
yeah, literally wide open. And he's like, how can you miss this guy? He's like 6'8". Like, he can jump about 45 feet high, and yet you still don't give him the ball. It's like Donna Parham, but he doesn't get covered.
Rooting for Colin Johnson this year.
Let's go ahead. Let's close out on your last positive team, a team that you want to invest in that nobody else is really talking about, and then we're gonna go ahead and get out of here.
Oh man, I think that was it for my positives, honestly.
Did you want to do your negative team then?
Oh, I have one more negative, and that was the Green Bay Packers.
It's so weird.
You know, again, everybody's just I avoid these teams where I feel like players are getting, boosted to the top of their projection. And I'm all right enough with the backfield, although it's like so pricey that I feel like every element of upside is kind of already baked into it. Like, to me, it's like for them to hit together with Jones going in round 2 and Dillon going in round 6, you probably need them to run like 20-30% 2 running back sets, which I think that they should do. But, we've been saying teams should run 2 running back sets for how many years, and how often do they ever actually do the thing that they should do? Who knows? So I think that, like, for Jones to really, really hit, he probably needs to either be utilized in 2 running back sets with Dillon as a receiver, or needs a Dillon injury to like smash at such a high cost. And then Dillon, like, probably the same. Like, he either needs to like play it in a true 50-50 split with Jones, in which case Jones is obviously not going to hit at his ADP, or he needs Aaron Jones to get hurt. And if Aaron Jones gets hurt, he smashes. But if they both play and they're not playing together, I don't know if they can both hit their ADP. I think one ends up losing out there. And then the receiver room is just a mess. Like, Allen Lazard has been driven up so far just based off of vacated targets. Christian Watson, rookie, still not on the field, had knee surgery. I don't even know if Sammy Watson's going to make the team. I was really into round 18 shots on my guy Romeo Doubs, who in all likelihood is going to be like a future Jacob version of the Chase Vernon guys that we're still holding a candle for in 4 years after they've played in 3 Arena Football League teams.
Why did you have to bring Andy Isabella up? Like, why do we have to talk about Andy? Oh, you did. You said Romeo Doubs. My bad.
I like Doubs in the 18th. He's now going in the 12th round on Underdog. And that's
he can't even beat press coverage.
Really
he can't beat press coverage.
Cody Carpentier had the boots on the ground from the Senior Bowl. Doesn't think he can beat press coverage. I saw him beat Eric Stokes in press coverage, roast him for a touchdown the other day in practice. So we'll see.
Oh yeah, you were there. You saw it.
I saw it on video. It was on Twitter.
How do you know that was actually Stokes? Maybe it was just somebody wearing his jersey.
I don't. It was just some random hot dog salesman put the Stokes jersey on. They're like, hey, can you run a 4.3? Yeah.
I love it. Make sure if you guys did enjoy this episode, you'll hit subscribe over there on YouTube, youtube.com/fantasyintervention. We have a lot more coming to you. We have a special announcement to make. I've been a little bit behind on certain things. We'll probably make it this upcoming week. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. We have some big news coming. Hopefully, Shane will be here next week. He's missed like 80% of the past few shows, but he should be here coming up for the season. We have things planned. Like, we actually just play games pretty much for the entire season-long show sheet.
Yeah.
And Jacob dominated last year. I came close, but I also had an extra week on him. So, we'll see if he can do it again. And I was talking about bringing in guests as well for that show.
Love it.
So, I see some of the people in the chat every single week. If you're involved in the chat and everything, we could bring you on games or maybe we'll show one time. Stay with us. Keep those comments coming. Make sure you guys subscribe. Jacob, where can we?
I'm on Twitter, FF_RTDB. You can find my recently posted tiered and archetype redraft ranks either the Bulletproof Discord or in the Full Tilt Discord. You can find that link. I tweeted it out. You can find my written work up on playerprofiler.com. And you can find me on the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast on Tuesdays.
Awesome. You guys can go check out all of our content over there at FF_intervention on Twitter. Trying to get our join our circle page unlocked right now. I have no idea what's going on with that, but that should be coming up here very, very soon. And yeah, just go check us out. If you guys are purchasing a trophy or a draft board, check out trophysmack.com. Use promo code CIRCLE. If you're purchasing a trophy or a belt, you will get a ring for free. Once again, that's trophysmack.com. Use promo code CIRCLE. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you all for letting us intervene with your fantasy football life. We're out.